Donald Trump apparently told Putin that he would bomb Moscow if they invaded Ukraine, and that he extended that strategy to the Chinese when it comes to Taiwan. Now, this is interesting because this seems to be the answer to an often asked question ever since Trump started talking big game in the fallout of the 2022 large-scale invasion, which was, this is Biden war, okay? This isn't Trump war. If Trump was president, okay, war would have never started. It would be peace from signing C to signing C. Now, all of the escalations that happened between 2016 and 2020, all of the violence and like small scale offensives that happened on the front line, all of the espionage and all of the build up towards plans like this, the fact that we moved nowhere closer to getting peace, none of that, okay, is an indication of how Trump would perform diplomatically when it comes to Putin putting him in a security crisis where he might invade. Because Trump had a plan to stop them from invading. They wouldn't invade when Trump was in there. You know, this war would have never started if Trump was in office. And when Trump was asked, how would you have stopped the war? He says, don't worry about it. You know, they respect me. That's the closest you would get to an answer. They respect me, or some combination of, you think I'm going to tell you? Well, now that they've already started the war, you probably could tell them, right? It's not like you're hiding this secret from, oh, if I tell them my magic plan of how to stop the war, then the Chinese might steal it. We might have peace or something. Like, there's no reason for him to keep it secret. Okay, you could maybe make a selfish campaign argument of, I'm not going to tell you how to make peace on the campaign trail because I want to be president, which is on its face horrific. The idea of, I'm going to allow the largest war in Europe to keep on going for electoral points to win me another 10,000, 20,000 votes in a swing state. It's horrific. But point is, Trump was making the generalistic point that if he was president in 2022, the invasion would have never started because the Russians would have respected him for some reason that he would not disclose. Well, we have some leaked audio from a fundraiser, a private fundraiser that Trump attended, that indicates, I think, the answer to our questions, which is Trump's big plan on how to stop the Russians from invading Ukraine if he was president, is he would have simply told them, and did tell them, according to his storytelling, we don't have any evidence of this outside of this leaked audio, that he would bomb Moscow if the Russians invaded Ukraine, that he would bomb Moscow. Listen to the audio.
We are getting exclusive audio from 2024 of Trump then as a candidate discussing details of a private conversation that he once had with President Putin. The audio obtained by the authors of a new book that is just out today. And for context, the president has long said that Putin would never have invaded Ukraine on his watch because of something he told him once privately. Trump had never revealed what that was.
I had a very strong conversation with President Putin, and he understood, and I won't go into the great details of the conversation because nobody has to know that, but I will tell you, it never, ever would have happened.
Why not? Why? I mean, this is in March 10th of 2022. If anything, this would be the moment to say, look, when I talked to Putin, I said, if you do this, I'm going to do that. Biden's being weak. He's not showing enough strength. This would be the moment to say, here is the actions I would take that'd be different than the administration to project strength. Instead, he's saying that he has a solution, that if they just would have had him in office, nothing would have happened, that he has a solution that he can't tell you about, but he has a solution. It sounds like any snake oil salesman or MLM scheme you would ever listen to. Don't worry about the details. Okay, just understand, okay, that you're going to make money and you can make more money by bringing other people. Don't worry about it, okay? Don't fear the triangular shape of the equation. Just don't worry about it. I have a solution to all your money problems. There was never any explanation, because I think that Trump on his face understood that if he went into the public and said, if the Russians invaded, I simply would have bombed Moscow, that the American public would probably react with disgust because A, it sounds childish, and B, if you don't take it like on its face as silly, it sounds really scary from the same guy who worried and gave much concern about a third world war.
Happened.
I don't want to say it, but did they fear me? I suspect they did.
Well, tonight we're learning those details as the audio reveals that Trump says that he threatened not just President Putin, but also China's President Xi Jinping. And this is what he told donors about what exactly that conversation looked like during a private fundraiser last year.
To Putin, I said, if you go in to Ukraine, we're going to bomb the shit out of Moscow. I'm telling you, I have no choice. The public wants it. The public. So he goes like, I don't believe you. He said, no way. And I said, way. And then he goes like, I don't believe you. But the truth is, he believed me 10%. And I told you this, he believed me 10%. Then I'm with President Xi of China. But I said the same thing to them. I said, if you go into Taiwan, I'm going to bomb the shit out of Beijing. He thought I was crazy. He said, Beijing, you're going to bomb me. I said, I have no choice. I got to bomb them. We're going to bomb Beijing. And he didn't believe me either, except 10%. And 10% is all you need. In fact, 5% would have been okay too. And we never had a problem. We would have never had a problem.
So his strategy is essentially, considering that President Trump is right now hesitant to send any physical aid to the Ukrainians with excuses of, critical shortages that the Joint Staff disagrees with or whatever, we're getting scammed, dictators, whatever the moment is, despite the fact that he hasn't shown any physical willingness to go out and use force or even transfer force where our soldiers don't get hurt to the Ukrainians. His strategy was to make the Russians and the Chinese believe that if they were to start trouble, he would bomb their nation's capital. But underpinning this, when you listen to the second part here, isn't like just as simple from Trump saying, if they invade, we will bomb them. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, I made them believe I would bomb them. That I, because of this madman theory that reports indicate Trump believes in, because I'm the madman, when I say I'll bomb Beijing, when I say I'll bomb Moscow, maybe I'll do it. It's unlikely. He said 10%. Maybe it's 10%. Hey, 5% is enough. But if there's a tiny bit in the head of Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping that Donald Trump's going to bomb them, actually, then maybe they won't do it. They'll decide, you know what? A war over the Donbass or a war to take over Ukraine isn't worth American bombs pummeling Moscow. And if the Russians knew that eventually drones would pummel them anyway, maybe they would have approached this war differently. But obviously they viewed a war with Ukraine a little differently with the response they expected and how many difficulties they'd run into. So the idea is that through Trump being the crazy guy, by him saying, I'll bomb you, that scares them enough that they wouldn't invade. Now, he has to make it sound believable. He has to make them believe it. And the one big flaw with the strategy is that it doesn't sound believable. It would be very difficult to believe that any U.S. president would say, I will bomb Moscow if you invade Ukraine, a country that we were all hesitant to even include into NATO, and we have explicit and pretty openly kicked the can down the road on NATO membership over the idea of provoking you. If you invade them, though, we will bomb your nation's capital. Also, the biggest theme on my campaign trail is World War III, World War III, World War III. There's too many ways for the Russians to think hopefully. And just like the Iranians have been very hopeful in their measurement of their own ability and the lack of ability of their opponents when they were engaging in military operations, the Russians have held that same belief. Overconfidence in themselves and a lack of respect for the power of their enemies. That's how they got into this mess in the first place. So, don't look at me surprised if I think that just telling the Russians, we'll bomb you, with no new giant investments into Ukrainian defense, with no massive retraining programs with the Ukrainian armed forces, with nothing physical to make that believable. right? If we say to the Russians, hey, we'll nuke you if you nuke us, we have infrastructure in place to make that believable. But when we haven't invested into Ukraine's defense in a way that would, you know, I mean, we've invested to a certain amount, but not in a way that would say, hey, we're willing to go to blows with an atomic power for it. We did it in ways that made clear that we had an interest in Ukraine and wanted to keep a certain amount of credibility. So I just don't think that this would have been enough to stop the Russians from invading. It's impossible to say how much, the Russians really believe Trump's madman theory. But if they do believe Trump's madman theory, then why haven't I seen that belief actualized now? If I'm supposed to actualize this belief in Trump's madman theory from the Russian or Chinese perspective, why hasn't it been actualized now that the war is underway? When Trump puts forward multiple 2-week deadlines that get disrespected, 30-day deadlines that get disrespected, 100-day deadlines that get disrespected, civilian ceasefires that immediately get violated, energy ceasefires that get violated, then respected, then violated again. When every single overture towards peace, including overtures towards peace that are very favorable to Russia's demands, that would allow them to hold on to, at least for the time being, all of the gains that they have captured through conquest, that will allow them to dig in trenches deeper, and would open them up for possibly new economic opportunities for sanctions relief from the United States, for business opportunities and business cooperation with the United States. It's not only saying, hey, we're not going to do anything in the immediate sense to remove you from this territory, and we're making clear that the Trump administration has no interest in removing you from this territory, and you can prepare for the next 3 years to either hold on to it or do whatever. Hell, possibly launch new offensives, because we took NATO membership off the table. We took American troops on the ground off the table. Before we even really seriously started negotiations, mind you, at the forefront of conversations with them. And we've seen no notable progress. What we have seen is negotiations dragged on and on and on and on. And you know what? I heard today that Lindsey Graham and other senators are introducing the sanctions legislation that has like 84 to 85 co-sponsors, right? Whoop-de-doo. Trump still has to be the one to okay it for the Republicans to be okay with really putting it forward, unless they're willing to take a risk that I have not been convinced that they are willing to take over it. And I mean, if these negotiations continue to be dragged out, then how much longer are we going to wait? Because I'm telling you, I listened to Marco Rubio talk to Secretary Lavrov today. And not the conversation, but Marco talking about it afterwards. And he said that they came to him with new ideas, and that he's going to communicate those new ideas to the White House. And then they're going to communicate whatever their response is on the new ideas back. When he was asked about sanctions policy, when he was asked about, hey, yesterday there was another record-breaking attack, XYZ, the response was, we leave all of this to the president. We leave all of this to the president. We want peace, we want peace, we want peace. We leave all of this to the president. So it could still be another month of them being dragged around despite all of this pressure from the Senate to move forward a sanctions package in this month. And so regardless if they go forward, regardless if they don't go forward, where has the Trump administration shown the Russians that, this madman theory has some bite to it, that they're willing to be a madman towards them? Where have they shown that it's not just big talk, but it's big action? When the majority of this time in the punching has been focused on the Ukrainians who have actually entertained unilateral immediate ceasefires, who have actually entertained and then delivered on the mineral deals that he wanted, that are not essential for Ukraine's defense, mind you, even though the Trump administration tried to pitch it that way. So, I mean, the Russians have not gotten any indication that they can't just keep going business as usual, if not even escalating it as they have done in many ways. So until I see Trump's madman theory actualized now, where the Russians are like, whoa, okay, we got to be careful about doing new big drone attacks, or whoa, we got to be careful about all these prisoner execution videos is making Trump look bad, or whoa, we haven't seen anything like that. And so I'm supposed to believe that in this alternative timeline, despite all these diplomatic efforts, despite Trump making very clear, like the fact that he wants this war to end in the short term, and him threatening sanctions, him threatening new aid packages, him threatening weapon sales, and him doing all this after offering them really good terms, we've seen no success. We've seen no movement. No movement in negotiations, and no movement in adding the pressure to bring them to the table or to walk the other path of helping the Ukrainians defend themselves and defend themselves as viciously as possible, so the Russians reconsider their choices, reconsider the war. And since we've seen no movement, the Russians will continue to operate in this limbo until they see a movement, because so far this state of affair benefits them. I mean, if they can wait out till September and October with no new American aid packages, no new sanctions, if they can keep dragging this out, then the amount of support coming from the United States from previously sent aid packages will continue to dwindle. Hell, that's if there's not another aid freeze, which could possibly be made without the president's no, as was the case with Pete Hegseth. So he can say, I'm going to bomb you, and that sounds strong. He can say that to Beijing. He can say that to Moscow. But the point of diplomacy isn't just to go out on the big stage and just bluff everybody, to take your dick out and wave it around like you're Lyndon B. Johnson until everybody shrieks in terror and says, okay, I'll give you what you want. Don't hurt us. Because there's disincentives to bombing Moscow. If you bomb Moscow, they could see that as a direct attack on the United States, on Russia, and so then they attack American military installations in Europe. There's disincentives there that the Russians know that there are disincentives, and so they're going to try to look at it with an element of, okay, how likely are they actually telling the truth here? If Trump was to go to them and say, look, if you invade into Ukraine, we will bomb the soldiers that are invading. We will directly bomb them. We will bomb the air defense systems, protecting them first to protect our aircraft, and then we will bomb those soldiers until you leave the country. We do not want to have a war on Trump's watch. We have no interest in a war on Trump's watch. We have no interest in us projecting weakness. So be happy with what you got for now. And if you want, maybe we can talk about a final settlement. That is something that at least sounds, well, not again. The Russians could say that's no, that's unlikely. That's unlikely. That sounds a tiny bit believable. That sounds semi-believable. But Trump just sees this as a big game of chicken. He just sees it as a big game of chicken. And so as long as he can make the strongest threat and project in some way this madman theory, then maybe it would have worked and stopped the war. But there's two problems with it. Number one, the threat is not believable. And I don't really think there's a way to make this threat believable without scaling down the threat. And number two, I do not believe that Donald Trump would have had a plan B. That if they actually would have gone through with it, that Trump would have delivered on that threat. And once he doesn't deliver on that threat to bomb Moscow, what's the result? Well, the Russians just tested American credibility, just tested another Obama red line, and found that it was weak, found that it was fragile. And so maybe Trump can make another threat. Well, if you continue with the war, now we'll totally do X, Y, and Z. And maybe that threat will even be real. Maybe in that point, he will really threaten bombing Russian troops. But he's already taken his own authority, his country's credibility, and the physical threats that it can manifest into question. And then the Russians can bet on Americans don't want another war in Europe. There's no way Trump is going to do that. And there's no answer to what if the Russians do that. Because so far, the last 170 days has been a manifestation of the fact that he has no answer for an ongoing war. He just has an answer on how to pivot the blame of that war to the previous administration. So this right here represents the missile. No, I'm not doing that. Come on.